Hello everybody and welcome to the latest episode of the Royal Blue Podcast. We have a full house joining me this afternoon to talk about Everton's 2-1 defeat to Luton Town at the weekend. I will go in order of Joe Thomas, Gavin Buckland and Chris Beesley. Joe, I'll start with you because there's no point sugarcoating it. We need to get straight into it. Everton beaten again at home at Goodison the weekend. 4 straight home defeats now. Just when you think the Blues have turned a corner, along comes another horror show.
Horror show is a good way to describe it, isn't it? I think because albeit obviously Everton were competitive in the game for most of it, this wasn't a smash and grab from Luton. I think that's one of the big concerns. Continuation of the home form, which is atrocious, big problem, questions as a result of that. There are lots of things in which we can talk about from this 90 minutes. I think I'll go first from the start and then from the end. That concerned me. The first one was in the first half, particularly that first 25 minutes before Luton got the goal, was albeit Everton created chances and they should have scored. Luton also created chances as well. And it worries me that it felt very clearly like Luton went into this game and identified it as a game that they could potentially win or have some attacking joy. They didn't come and think, oh, we can get a very useful point here and stick 11 men behind the ball. They came out and they went for Everton, which is why Everton created chances the other way. Obviously didn't take them. Everton had plenty of warnings about Luton's threat, failed to heed them. We'll come on to set pieces later, I'm sure. Flip it through for the last half an hour, the whole last second half, based on my match report on this, just a complete lack of cohesion, intelligence, maturity, authority in that second half display. That Everton side is better on paper than that Luton side, quite considerably, I think. And when Everton needed goals, there just didn't seem to be a plan. There just didn't seem to be any kind of attacking identity. And I thought that once Dominic Calvert-Lewin got that goal back on the stroke of half time, I thought, you know what, Everton, they've got 45, probably 55, 60 minutes here just to calm things down, have a little think, do what they did at Brentford. After Brentford, the thing that impressed me most at Brentford was, they should have been ahead at half time. They weren't, but they were the better side, and they seemed to identify that. They came out the second half. That first 15 minutes before they got the second goal at Brentford, they played as if they knew they were the better side. They didn't play in a rush. They were just controlled, and eventually it came. And I thought, if they had 45 minutes that in the second half against Luton, they'd at least got a point. Probably, it might even have got the win. Instead, they didn't. They just panicked. There was just no. It was long balls up, and that was it. And that really is a worry as well for me.
Gav, as someone who predicted a 3-0 win for the Blues on Friday in this pod, I take it you was a pretty disappointed man leaving Goodison Park on Saturday evening.
I am, yeah, I was, yeah. I'm contractually obliged to know you did text me after the pod on Friday to say that I was being a bit over-ambitious and that you were worried. And I did respond to it by saying, sort of along the lines of, don't get too cocky because you fluked the Brentford game, And to be fair, Connor, spot on again for the second consecutive week. It was frustrating for me on the basis that I thought we started quite well. First, we looked like a team for the first 10-15 minutes. We'd won their previous two matches, with good performances. There was a little bit of inventiveness in around the box, some nice interplay. We created a couple of half chances. And then, as Joe was saying there, Luton gradually got into the game, like they believed that they'd get something from it. And, then we know what happened. They had 3 or 4 corners, and then you just realise we're going to be in trouble here if they get another corner. And we know what happened. And that was the frustrating thing for me, was that, well, the good start was wasted, and then equally frustrating the second half, as Joe was saying. How many times have you seen a team 2-0 down, they score just before half time, and it changes the game, especially when they're at home and you think come back in the second half, win 3-2, and it was nothing of the sort, was it? We just created very, very little in the second half. A Beto header, and that was about it. And that was that was the frustrating thing for me, the start and the end of the game, really, Connor.
I think just to be on the prediction side of things, just to not blow my own trumpet too much, I did say at half time, and I was pretty wrong, that Everton are going to win this when we were talking at half time, because I was of the opinion that they would get a leveller, and then they're going to win it, because I think Luton would get caught in the thing of, does he stick or twist, in the sense of defend and play for a point because you've been 2-0 up, or try and go back at Everton. So I was wrong in that. I was wrong.
Really for you these days.
Well, yeah, that's not often said.
Yeah.
Chris, there used to be a common theme with Everton of the away day blues, struggles on the road, horrific away form, some really bad performances, some really damaging results. But this time it's swings and roundabouts because it's the home form that's affecting the Blues, and you know another team has come and took all 3 points.
Yeah, and that's concerning because as much as we can enjoy those back-to-back away wins, you know, in the likelihood is you're not going to have a season where Everton are going to win the majority of their away matches. They're going to be propped up, you'd hope, by their form at Goodison Park, and it's a frustration for the manager. It's very much a frustration for the fans because Joe and I were fortunate enough, along with those paying fans who saw those games at Brentford and Villa, to see those performances. But you know, the majority of Evertonians, let's be realistic, are only going to see them at Goodison Park, and that's 4 defeats out of 4 now. Barely a goal. Obviously, that was the first goal they'd scored all season at home, and even they had to wait seemingly an eternity for that one before the VAR result came through. It's very, not just frustrating but concerning. How I mean, I spoke to Michael Ball earlier today for his column, and he talks about Sean Dyche has been unable to sort of tap in onto the power of Goodison. I remember him speaking back in ahead of the Fulham game last season when he wanted to, you know, use that phrase, turn it into a fortress, and it's just not happened for them. They've obviously they won the game they needed to against Bournemouth right at the end, but they've not had enough home wins, and when they have come, they've been 1-0, haven't they? So when they do go behind like that, they're always playing catch up. So yeah, it's very concerning, and of course for those long suffering supporters who turn up in great numbers week in, week out, you know, it's a miserable existence for them. I did my piece last night about a small child we could hear inconsolable after the final whistle who was crying, and I said, well, it's been a trail of tears at Goodison for Everton for a long time now, never mind claims of good times. That's what it's become, and yeah, it's very tough, and like we said, just as we thought they turned a corner and we might actually have a bit of positivity to talk about, it's same old problems.
Joe, we will get into the game and look at Everton's, you know, defensive shambles at the back from set piece and stuff, but I want to ask about Sean Dyche, because obviously after the game on Saturday, you know, you go on Twitter and stuff like that and you speak to people, and the jury very much seems out on Sean Dyche in terms of what people think. You know, there's an argument that another manager maybe could get more out of these players, but when you look at how Everton set up, certainly in the first 15-20 minutes, they create, you know, 5 or 6 good openings. You know, if we're being honest, they probably should be 3-0 up with the chances they've got. You know, certainly Rissagarnagay should score. He can't really do any more, can he? In the sense, because he's set the team up to create chances, and we've seen this not just the Luton game at home this season, where they have created openings, probably with the exception of Arsenal. He can't really do no more probably than go on there himself and put the ball in the back of the net, can he? Because the team are set up to create chances, and they're just not taking them.
Yeah, I have a degree of sympathy for Sean Dyche in this. I'd have picked the same starting 11 that he picked. You know, we do a piece before the games where we do that, and I think he was perhaps caught in a bit of a trap with James Garner, where James Garner had such a good week. There was no way you could leave him out the starting lineup. But then it was do you disrupt the centre midfield or not? Obviously, you know, you potentially moved him in the middle. There's a case for going, well, this is Luton, go at them, get Arno Danjuma down the left and attacking them, and maybe that was the case, but yeah, given the week that they had, I thought that was fair enough, and given the first 15 minutes, I thought that was fair enough with the way they started. In that, albeit there were opportunities for Luton to go up the other end, Everton had plenty of their own. And I think where my sympathy comes in for him is that obviously we know he's inherited a very difficult situation at Everton. Kept them up last season, deserves the credit for that, and it deserves to still have some credit in the bank going into this season as a result of that. But regardless of what him and Kevin Fowler were discussing around transfer market, he can only work with what he's got. And what he's done with that group of players is he's set up a team which really should have double-figure points by now. All he can do is set up a team to create chances. He can't put the chance in the back of the net. And time again, we're seeing that's undermining them. And the first 15 minutes, they had some good chances. They didn't have great chances. They weren't ripping Luton apart, but they were in and around the box a lot, and they certainly should have made the keeper work a lot harder for it. If Idrissa gets his shot on target, albeit Everton are losing by this point, but I mean James Garner's header, great run, brilliant, great to see him ghost in like that, but should have done better with the header. Dyche can't take responsibility for everything. And he can't take responsibility for that finishing, just like he couldn't take responsibility for Doucouré and Mopé's finishing against against Fulham earlier on the season, and then similar against Wolves. Yeah, I think we all kind of universally agree that he's probably handled Dominic Calvert-Lewin's attempts to get fit reasonably well. And obviously, it was only back towards the end of the transfer window they were able to sign Beto and reinforce the striking options. So even the players on the pitch aren't his fault, because look at the options that he had to choose from. And then you flip aside, you look at you look at defensively where the 2 goals come from. I mean, Everton had warnings from set pieces already. We saw Tom Lockyer's header, like he won it too easily. It thundered over the bar. Everton got away with one. There were 38,000 Blues in that stadium going, oh, we have to be careful here about set pieces. And it seems like the only ones who weren't alive to that were the 11 players that were on the pitch. Because obviously we saw what happened with the next corner, where this time Carlton Morris, again, someone you would expect to be challenging in the air for these things, gets a header that then causes the problems that lead to Lockyer's goal. And then they've had the second warning, which they have failed to learn the lessons from. And then in the next set piece, you've got Carlton Morris at the back post, completely unmarked. Now, we can talk about set pieces in general. We can talk, there are lots of things that we can talk about from, Dyche and how he sets teams up, and et cetera, but there isn't, I can't believe that there is a scenario that unfolds at Finch Farm in the games between Villa and Luton where they're not saying, "Oh, just keep an eye on them." Luton's biggest attacking threat from set pieces. Don't mark Carlton Morris. And I just can't see how in the middle of all that game, especially with the warnings they've had, the fact that of those 11 players on the pitch, you would think that people would have specifically been assigned to mark Carlton Morris because he's one of their biggest threats.
And Tom Lockyer as well.
But I'm mainly talking about the second goal here because obviously Carlton Morris is completely unmarked at the back post. Surely there should be someone there who sat there thinking, "Oh, where's me man? Oh, he's not here. Okay, well, where is he? Oh, look, he's over there unmarked at the back post in acres of space." Again, I don't think Dyche can take responsibility for that, because at some point the players have to do that as well. They get a big theme in my Pete, and I also tactically I think he probably got things wrong in the second half. But the players also do need to take some responsibility here as well. He keeps saying they got to write their own story. Well, they are the authors of that page and of that narrative. And the failures to take responsibility for their own actions, either taking the chances or marking your players or having the awareness to look around and seeing what the problem is and actually try and do something about it. Severely lacking against Luton, and I only think Dyche can take part of the blame for that. Like I think a lot of that on Saturday has to go down to the players, and therefore I do have a bit of sympathy for Dyche. I don't know what else he can do, because even if, for all the chances that they missed, if they just defend set pieces properly, they still come out of that with a 1-0 win. In theory,
Gav, in terms of creating chances, missing chances, Everton are becoming somewhat the experts at Goodison Park this season, because it was another day when several good openings in Premier League went begging.
So 21 attempts on goals or something like that.
Of which largely come in the first half.
Yeah, but that was symbolic in its own way, wasn't it? Really? Yeah, I felt. I'm not sure whether the stats bear this out, but I felt that we were in not as good chances as against Fulham and Wolves. I mean, I can think of the Garner header and the Garner guy needs, I don't know what he's got on the end of his football boots, but I can't remember the goalie having to make a great save. I mean, against Fulham, like Mopé had like 2 or 3 chances here and there, one-on-ones and stuff, but I can't remember on Saturday, apart from the goal where you think, oh, we should have scored there, apart from the Garner header. But 21 attempts on goal, you will be expecting more, more of an expectation of goals, aren't you, really, from 20, as I say, more than 20 attempts and that. And it was just symbolic of those three home games, wasn't it, really? We should be converting our 60% possession, wasn't it? Possession shots should be generating more goals than what it is for us at the moment. And I think I agree with Joe again. I think the second half we lost shape, didn't we? And we lost the sort of potency we'd shown in the first 20 minutes that dissipated, hasn't it, by the second half, because the shape of the team had gone and some of the creativity had gone. And it also showed as well, by the way, that whatever we can get away with it when Garner plays in the middle is that thing about we haven't got really the guile in and around the box. is in very short supply, isn't it? To create, what you would call it, an expected goal or whatever. XG, to create that, where you just get it to the byline, pull it back into somebody there to knock it in at the end of the 6-yard box. We haven't got that in us.
Well, it felt like Jack Harrison had been cursed, didn't it? He'd only 20 minutes into his Goodison Park career and he put one right in the Gladys Street Rose head. Didn't miss one. Didn't take long for it to...
I suppose so, but...
He also put a gorgeous in-swinging ball across with his left foot across the box that no one put in, and it speaks to some of what you just said there, Gav. Obviously, you'd be looking for Dominic Calvert-Lewin to be on the end of that. Well, one of the things I noticed in the last 20 minutes was he was increasingly dropping deep to try and be that kind of creator. I was going to mention this. That's the problem with 4-4-2, isn't it? Is one of your strikers will naturally come deeper to look for the ball and to have the X-man in midfield. So you end up basically playing the same systems with Decore, don't you? But you've got Calvert-Lewin in the Decore role. And that happens, and that happened to Brentford, wasn't it? It was a great ball put in. And Decore should have just carried on running. He had the tap in at the far post, didn't he? And I think, that sort of stuff's missing. We're creating a lot of goal opportunities, but we're not, for me, creating what you would call, hackneyed old phrase, gilt-edged chance. That's the frustrating thing for me, and you saw that in abundance on Saturday.
Chris, where is the big worry for you from all this, from like an attacking point of view? Because I spoke to Dominic Calvert-Lewin afterwards, and he was kind of saying, well, we're creating chances, and that's the most important thing. Because if you weren't creating, then you'd be worried and stuff like that. But like the lads have touched on, you've got to create good openings and then take them. And Everton, seemingly can't really create that great of openings and certainly not take them.
Yeah, I mean, there did seem to be. I mean, both when you're attending the post-match press conferences and you got the two managers, there's always going to be two prisms in which the game is viewed from the two opposition managers. And to be fair, I was probably siding more with Rob Edwards' interpretation of events and Sean Dyche's, because Sean Dyche mentioned all the chances again, but like we said, the keeper wasn't worked. A lot of those chances were off target, other than the header from Garner, and I think even Amadou Onana had one that flashed across, would have been a real spectacular one, but again off target. Keeper didn't have to deal with it. And even as we say, Dyche sort of he did sort of explain why he was mentioning it, but XG even came onto his lips at one point when he was explaining the stuff that he'd done. Whereas Rob Edwards was actually saying, when I was speaking to him about they weren't exactly clinging on. It's not like the Everton were knocking at the door, and it seemed only a matter of time. As we've all said, maybe they might have been there for another hour or so, and they still might not have scored. That was the concerning thing: the way Everton lost their way in the second half, and the way there's a lack of consistency after those two terrific performances. I mean, we made the point of it. What a glorious upbeat podcast it was on Friday. It was pride before the fall almost. That Evertonians actually thinking that just for a moment they could enjoy themselves, just go to Goodison Park and actually feel
wrong straight away, isn't it?
It's that lack of consistency there. Except that the only thing that they are consistent, unfortunately, at the moment is this dire home form, and the fact that they're running out of games. Already 4 games, you say, other than Arsenal. They're all games you'd expect Everton to get something from. Certainly not getting beat. So that's the problem. In isolation, these games aren't so bad. I mean, you could say Saturday was, in terms of the strength of the opposition and just how glaring the errors were for the 2 Luton goals. Very concerning. But it's not like they're getting to. It's not that we've only had the Aston Villa game where they were totally outclassed. But when it's happening most weeks, you're losing by that 1 goal every week, and then that's when the alarm bells start to ring, because they could be slow starters and they can pick things up, and it's only a few days ago that we're saying, oh well, everything's looking rosy for Everton now, there's options in there and he can shuffle things around, and then they throw in a performance like that.
Joe, I know your verdict was pretty much on this lines, but for me, when Chris says the alarm bells were ringing more for that last 20 minutes when Everton, I don't know whether it was a sense of desperation because they knew that they were behind, and they're probably staring down the barrel of another defeat to a team everyone thinks they should be, not just beaten, but beaten comfortably, or whether they just simply ran out of ideas and didn't really have anything up the sleeve to combat how, defensively organised Luton were. But to just see James Tarkowski pumping balls needlessly, hopelessly forwards, and Calvert-Lewin seemingly having to win the flick on to then go after the flick on he's won himself, just for me was quite worrying and alarming, because the talent Everton have got in their squads, they should be producing a lot more, much better than that.
They should be, and I think probably the one in-game mistake that I think Deitch made was when he brought Beto on, and I know that there's been a lot of clamour for the idea of Beto and Calvert-Lewin up front together. Yeah, I've said on here already, that doesn't seem the obvious move for me. The obvious move for me is, if you're going to go with two up top, to put Dan Juma alongside one of them, and then have him as a support striker, someone who's got that little bit more of that guile, can beat a player with the ball at his feet, and someone who maybe you would fancy to get a decent shot on target, essentially, if you've got a bit of space 20 yards out. And I thought the problem, talk about Tarkowski pumping long balls. When you look at the Everton midfield and the lack of guile that we've already talked about, I don't think Deitch has set up a side that he ever envisages playing that much through the middle. We've seen Amadou Onana do it from time to time, and he's got a great assist for Ghana against Villa, and should have had a few assists against Fulham. He can play that through ball when he's got a bit of time and space. But really, when you put Beto on as opposed to Dan Juma, and you've got Beto and Calvin on top, what else are they going to do other than pump long balls? And the frustrating thing is, there's probably a bit of a failure to realise that's exactly what Luton would have wanted. That's when they're going to be at their most comfortable. A side that's come up from the Championship and is fighting to, the conversation around Luton is not even fighting to stay in the Premier League, but fighting to try and just keep it respectable in the Premier League this season. And there just wasn't any cohesion to the attack, and I thought that was the problem with bringing Beto on where they did. And I think that I got to look at this from both sides of the coin. On the one hand, I think Deitch didn't help the situation with that change. On the other hand, I think you also then look at the problems that he's inherited, and this is a side that can only play one type of football, really. It can only really play that 4-5-1, 4-4-1-1.
It's a squad designed for a certain type of manager as well, isn't it?
It's a squad designed for a certain type of football. And I think it's easy to say that, that it's been created for the manager as a style of play that this manager's most comfortable with. But I also do think, in fairness to him and Kevin Farwell, you have to look at the pieces that they had to start the summer with. And bear in mind all the players that left. And with the resources that they had, it was going to be very, very difficult for them to... They were already struggling with their plan A, because they needed to get a talismanic, focal point striker in to play, just in case Calvert-Lewin suffers with his injury problems again. So they already only had probably 3/5 of a plan A, and they didn't have the resources to solve that and then move on to a plan B, and then maybe start thinking like a plan C. That squad depth is a problem. Deitch has said it's a problem. It's a problem that we felt at the beginning of the season with the injuries. It's a problem that isn't so much of an issue now, in the sense that so many players are coming back. But it's a problem that may well rear its head again when we get towards Christmas. You look at December, not just the amount of games, but also the quality of the opponents that they're going to get, the time of the year that it is, pressure that be on those players and those bodies, and the pressure that may well come on them from the position that they're going to be in the league. Then it's going to be problematic again. And I don't think you can't blame Deitch for that. We know the wider situation at Everton, the problems of the years of misspending and misdirection, and where they've taken them. So yeah, there was a lot to be concerned about in that last 20 minutes, that last half an hour. I think Deitch added to the problems with that change. Probably would have been more sensible to have brought Dan Juma on rather than Beto, and then maybe bring Beto on for Calvert-Lewin for the last 20-25 minutes. But yeah, it's if they can't create good opportunities at home to Luton when they really need to, it is a problem. And it does point to problems going on further into the season as well. So I think it's something that we do need to be concerned about. Obviously, the challenge now is to make Luton the blip, and Brentford, Villa and Bournemouth coming up the norm, as opposed to making what we all fear might be the case, that Villa and Brentford were the blip, and Bournemouth on Saturday is not necessarily saying this from a managerial context, but just from the season in general. Bournemouth is looking very, very important.
We'll save all that Bournemouth stuff for Friday. But no, Gav, Joe touches there on a Beto change and substitution. But I actually thought a little bit Everton lost away when he took Idrissa Gana Gueye off at half time and moved, obviously, James Garner into the middle and put Jack Harrison out wide. Because for as good as Garner and Onana were at Aston Villa, and for as good as the two of them can be in terms of potential, it just felt like they didn't have almost like a responsible adult telling them what to do, and they were a little bit. It was kind of like a little bit like they were just doing what they thought was right, and I think Everton lost away a little bit in that sense because the game just become far too open.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think we argued on Friday that I'd play James Garner in the middle with Onana and Decore. So I feel obviously it gives us more passing ability and creativity. Is what you've seen so far, but yeah, you're right. We lost our shape, didn't we? And I think Garner, when he chases the game, I think Gana Gueye is quite a good player to have because he will chase the ball forward and get it back. And I think James Garner's more of a technical player where I think if you're certainly away from home, I think he's far more suited for when he's trying to control a game rather than chase it. And I felt in the second half, you're right, ironically enough, having the conversations we had about like James Garner on Friday, that we did lose that little bit of energy. And that brings me on to the other point I was going to raise, is Onana, he's a strange player for me. I felt on Saturday that he should be setting the tempo in the second half. He's the young player, he's got the legs, and he should be setting the tempo for the team. He's got the game for it. And I find that when we're chasing the game like we have done a couple of times at home in the second half, I won't say he hides, but I don't think he's the influence on the team in terms of driving them forward as what he should be. And that was disappointing again for me. I just feel at the moment that when we play well, he plays well. When we don't play well, you don't see that much of him.
Yeah, I think to coin a phrase used often by my granddad, he doesn't grab the game by the scruff of the neck.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice little 80s, 90s throwback for the listeners there.
Thank God he said scruff of the neck. I thought he was going to say something else. But and exactly. He's got the game for it. He's got the personality for it. He's got the physical attributes for it. But he just doesn't. And he should be doing that. I think he's eminently capable of doing that. But I find that he does the opposite.
Yeah.
He grabs the game by the scruff of the neck to a degree when we're winning or we've got a chance. Like you said about the Brentford game on Saturday, first 15 minutes of the second half, when you can win this and he'll up his game. But when we're getting beat, he doesn't. Strange enough, for somebody who's obviously quite an outgoing personality, it appears to go into a shell. And consequently, we miss Gana Gueye as a result of that. I never thought to say that because, as you know, I'm not as big as fan, but I felt you're right. I thought we missed Gana Gueye's presence and his ball and capability in the second half, and that was one of the reasons why we just failed to pose any sort of threat.
I don't know whether it's a case, obviously they don't play 4-4-2 that often, so, and Garner and perhaps haven't got the understanding just yet of how to play as a two, but I just thought it's like the two of them didn't really know what to do, where to go. It was kind of like James Garner dropping in deep to get the ball, and Onana just seems to be floating around the pitch, and gaps just appeared all over the pitch essentially, and enabled Luton, I think, to get up the pitch a lot easier than what they probably should have been able to, because we didn't recycle the ball back to put them under pressure as good as we should have done. Yeah,
and that's the problem at home, isn't it? Away from home, you can. I felt the three at the back work really well, as I said on Friday, but those two in front, when there's four, four at the back, two central defenders, the role as a two is slightly different. And slightly different to what it was at Villa, and you felt that. There was a little bit of disorganised, just making up as they go along, which is always a danger when you change things around quite fundamentally at half time. But yeah, I think you're right there, Connor. I think Gana Gueye's presence was missed, to be fair.
Bees, another substitute who was thrown on in a bid to wrestle something back from the game, was obviously Beto. Yeah. I think it's fair to say he endured a tough afternoon. I think nothing kind of quite come off for the big man up top. Is the concern a little bit, one of my concerns a little bit from watching at the weekend is Beto could almost become the perfect starting number 9, but he's not maybe the type of player who will be have an impact off the bench. He needs to start and go into a game rather than be thrown on with 20 minutes to go. But I just thought on Saturday we certainly saw when Sean Dyche's caution a few weeks ago about, he's a bit rough and a bit,
Yeah.
a bit raw, we saw that it was all clear to see.
Perhaps so, though. He obviously made an impact on his debut at Doncaster Rovers, and he came off the bench. And
don't think that was quite difficult.
Yeah.
Well against Sheffield United.
He starts the Sheffield United, didn't he?
Yeah. So
I'm saying come off the bench.
Yeah. So but of course, I just hope it's not one of those where he comes in, 24 hours later, and nobody sort of knows what he's about. Whereas now teams are obviously going to start doing their homework on Beto and what he offers. It's early days. Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it was only a few days ago saying, "Oh, isn't it great? We've got these like for like alternatives, and Beto and Calvert-Lewin can interchange those." And yeah, if one of them starts off and the other one can come on and finish. But yeah, for me, it's kind of what I've heard from him already, and what I've spoken to people from Portugal and knew him when he was younger. He's obviously a great athlete, very quick, but he also, he's intelligent in the way he can hold the ball up and stuff, but just seems to need that little bit more composure. I mean, it's a bit of another concern when you're talking about one of your main strikers, I mean, with the finishing power, because a few of them haven't quite come off. Obviously, there was one at Brentford that rolled across, face a goal. But to be fair, him and Calvert-Lewin, like we were saying, they weren't playing to their strengths. It's not like they were getting the crosses in towards them. And I think another thing Michael Ball said to me is that when Harrison came on, he never once got to the byline. I know he likes to cut inside and stuff, and like he's mentioned the one cross that did go in there and there was nobody there. But yeah, they weren't playing to the two strikers' strengths. But yeah, it's early days for Beto. I'd much rather have him there as an alternative to Calvert-Lewin rather than Neil Maupay, who's anything but a like-for-like replacement. It's actually just as a very small side issue. It's just what happened with Joseph Chimiti now, because obviously he came in earlier in the summer, and for a long time was actually Everton's only cash purchase before obviously they got those deals done later on. And given that they've signed another 6'4" Portuguese centre forward in Beto, who's a lot more further along the line, I'm just interested. I've been doing these EFL Trophy games the last couple of weeks, and that's been the problem with Everton in both of those games, is that the build-up play had been decent, they've been good technically, but just nothing in the final third. And you're thinking this would probably be the ideal opportunity for Chimiti to learn the English game and to sort of come in those games. It's not like he'd be an overage player, he fits into that category. I'm just interested, it's not like it's not one of the main issues that we've got this week for Everton of everything that's gone wrong at the weekend. But just he's sort of caught there, isn't he, between Calvert-Lewin and Beto, both ahead of him now. You'd think that, you'd be getting a bit more of game time in Paul Tate's side. So it was just interesting with me doing those two games in that competition that he wasn't involved in those.
Well, you can't see Sean Dyche playing 4-3-3 anytime soon, can you? With all three of the pitch at once. Joe, just one more before we wrap up and finish. 3 interesting spectators at Goodison Park on Saturday for the game. See Josh Wonder, Steve Pascoe and Don Dreisfield of 7-7 Partners taking up their seats on the front row of the director's box. What do you think they would have made of what they witnessed?
Well, one thing I was
gasp for breath there, I think so. It sums it up.
Well, I mean, they can't be under any illusions, can they? They've come and seen that, Goodison is a wonderful stadium, a tribute to British football. They're seeing a fan base which is passionate, which is behind its side, and which is a powerful force when it can be harnessed. Obviously, the players are struggling to do so at the moment, but that wasn't for any fault of the fans. I thought there was a lot of goodwill towards the players and a lot of patience with them on Saturday, and unfortunately, they couldn't take advantage. I think they've got a glimpse of just how difficult things are. I don't. Obviously, we know that Don Dransfield is a football man. I don't know how much the other two know about football in particular, but I can't imagine that they'll have, regardless of whether their understanding is good or bad, I think it's pretty hard to come away from a defeat against a newly promoted side such as Luton, who haven't won all season, and be hugely positive about what's happened. I mean, one of the things I was looking out for, we saw it at Brentford before the game last week. There was a 777 not welcome banner unfurled, and I was looking for it in the home fan, and I couldn't see it at Goodison. So, I think that it's interesting. I think a lot of the fan base at the minute is conflicted really about where the direction that they want the club to go in, bearing in mind how poor and limited the options seem to be, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, they've got a good dose of reality. I think they probably would have learned more than they would have done if the Everton that we expected had turned up and won their third game in a week. I think that's fair to say.
Perhaps the good, the bad, and the ugly
Yeah.
is a good way to describe it. But gents, we will leave things there. I think we've chewed the fat on all things Luton enough for our listeners to listen back in horror, perhaps, and recall the events. But we will, of course, be back on Friday to preview Everton's next Premier League fixture, which is a huge home game against Bournemouth. But for today, thank you very much for listening to the Royal Blue Podcast.